So
I think we're rocking.
I think we are. All right. Are we ready to do this?
Bring it.
It's not the first time. Won't be the last time. You're gonna kill it. You're gonna kill it. You're gonna kill it.
Who was that? If I can...
That's us. That's actually us. That's me and my brother, my brother's Amir, and
Oh, great! I was like, I'd never heard that Lover Boy song.
that Loverboy song. Yeah, thank you. Right. Here we go. Greetings, fellow human beings. Welcome. My name is Ali Rizvi. This is Unlicensed Therapist. And here on this show, we're going to, this is the first episode, we're going to dissect the human experience in the 21st century. We're going to be exploring how we think, how we relate to one another, what we believe in and why. My name is Ali. I'm an author, a physician, and a musician. So join me as we take a boldly unorthodox, daringly unconventional, avant-garde look at everything from geopolitics, health, and relationships to neuroscience, astrophysics, and comedy, and a lot more, with some of the most disruptive and charismatic minds alive today. We're launching this podcast during a difficult time in the world with yet another war in the Middle East. That's where I grew up. And in the spirit of this project, Unlicensed Therapists, we're not going to take the approach of the two sides. We have one person on each side sort of duking it out, and that's what you see everywhere else. My guests and I today come from different sides of many borders, but we're going to have a conversation that transcends all of them. So Mookie Spitz is my guest today. He is the Jewish-American son of Hungarian Holocaust survivors. And me, I was born in a Pakistani Muslim family, and I grew up in Saudi Arabia. So we come from vastly different backgrounds. But in North America, we're friends. But elsewhere, we may not have been. So in this episode, this inaugural episode of this podcast, we're going to do more than just talk to each other. We're going to listen. So over the next hour or so, we're going to get into how our vastly different backgrounds shaped our views on the Israel-Palestine conflict, the current war between Israel and Hamas, and whether peace can provide justice. Mookie Spitz is also a communications strategist and the author of a fantastic and unique book that we are going to get to, and we're going to talk about. So, Spitz, we've done this a few times before, but this is the first time that we're doing this on this new podcast and this new project. So welcome. And it's kind of, I was thinking there's nobody better than you to do this first episode with, especially with everything that's going on. And
my pleasure. It's a privilege to be here and looking forward to a dynamic conversation.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with this. So you are I described you as the Jewish American son of Hungarian Holocaust. Yeah. So can we start by just getting into your background and how you grew up?
Yeah, I think relevant for the conversation, we can look back to March of 1944. It was about a week before my father's 16th birthday. And he woke up to the rattling of Tiger tanks, German Tiger tanks in formation outside of his window in Budapest. So this was the tail end of World War II. And about 9 to 10 months later, he experienced the same kind of vision of Russian T-34, T-36 tanks rolling through his street, with 90% of his family killed through the dynamics of the Holocaust, which arrived relatively late to Hungary, but it was probably at its most effective peak. So I grew up amid this zeitgeist of fear, of paranoia, of basically an unstable system that was out to get you. I grew up in this environment where the world was anti-Semitic and murderous, and me and my family were always on the defensive. You can fast forward about 35 years after my father managed to survive the war, when he's in Israel for the first time, and he sees the first edition of the Merkava tanks rolling down the street with the Jewish star emblazoned on them instead of the swastikas and the hammer and sickles. And to him, that was a revelation and a justification and a validation of everything that he had ever been through. It was the context and rationale for the creation and flourishing of the state of Israel. So I grew up with this dichotomy shared by, I think, a lot of Jews, especially American Jews, that the Holocaust, in a sense, engendered the state of Israel, and that the two were joined at the hip, if you will, in terms of providing a vision for the Jewish state, its justification, and its political circumstances. And that kind of dichotomy between running away from and running toward opportunity characterized my life growing up in Chicago after two emigrations. So my father left Europe, emigrated to South America, Caracas. They were giving visas, the Americans weren't. And about 16 years later, I ended up being an anchor baby in Chicago, Illinois, just barely born here. So I'm a first generation American Jew. And I grew up in this swirl of they're trying to genocide us. They're out to get us, coupled with this almost magnanimous Jewish nationalism where Israel could do no wrong for all the reasons that I've just described.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Did you also believe that as you grew up? Is that something that had an effect on you?
Yeah, pretty much. My father was secular, which is interesting in all of this. The family wasn't practicing in Budapest. They didn't keep kosher. My father remarked to me at one point that what upset him the most about the Holocaust was that he didn't really self-identify as being that Jewish, and they were still out to kill him. However, he felt tradition was important, and this sense of nationalistic pride had to be communicated to me, and I had to believe it. So he sent me to Hebrew school, which I endured for about 4 or 5 years until I was officially bar mitzvahed. And during this time, there was almost this focused indoctrination. It was a traditional synagogue in really the Jewish ground zero in the Midwest in America, Skokie, Illinois, noted later for its Nazi march, which happened actually concurrently with me going to Hebrew school. So I was pumped with this notion, which was absolutely analogous to my parents' own upbringing.
Yeah.
Holocaust, Zionism, Israel, Jewish destiny. And I was skeptical, which, continues to this day, which is probably why I'm here talking to you.
Yeah.
So I always had my own ideas. I had a Hebrew school teacher who screamed at us that the world was no more than about 5,500 years old. I raised my hand and I said, well, what about the fossils? What about the dinosaurs? How could you have these artifacts from millions of years ago? What are they? And my teacher yelled at me, pointing, well, it doesn't matter what they are. God put them there, and please shut the hell up. So I felt it was propagandistic, if you will, indoctrination, and I resisted it. And I felt that I had to kind of pave my own way. But throughout my adulthood, I've been bounced back and forth between family, friends, even colleagues who flow along this spectrum of Jewish nationalism and Jewish identity. And frankly, it's challenging in a time like this, especially with the war, where Israel has never been more vulnerable and threatened, and American Jews have never, ever been this polarized about Israel, Zionism, the Palestinians, and really our place in the world, how we fit, and how we characterize our own destiny.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that. I know you've written quite a bit about it. One thing I didn't mention at the outset was that Mookie has been writing about this topic very, very eloquently and with a lot of nuance, and he just has a very a perspective on it that you don't really find elsewhere. And you're writing on Medium, and in the final version of this episode, you're going to see the link to some of his articles in the description. So that's we do have very different backgrounds. I grew up very differently, so I think that there's a lot of places I can start, but I'm going to start with this one. I think the one thing that explains it the best, and this is when I was in 5th grade in Saudi Arabia. So I went to an American school. This is why I talk like this. I was born in Pakistan, which was formed also around the same time Israel was because of a certain religious group, and then we moved to Libya, which is another Muslim majority country. And then I grew up mostly in Saudi Arabia. So in Saudi Arabia is when I went to the American school. I was in 5th grade. At that time, we had a little art project where we were making snowflakes. There's no snow in Saudi Arabia, but it was an American school. It was Christmas time. We used to call it winter break. Couldn't really say Christmas. They don't have religious freedom there. At least they didn't at that time. And we folded up a piece of paper. You make snowflakes out of paper. We cut it up the way that we were supposed to, use glue and glitter to decorate them, put our names on them, and the teacher put them up on the bulletin board. Now, what happened there in that school is regularly, a few times a year, you'd have somebody from the Ministry of Education in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh come to see whether everything was going according to the way that they wanted it to go in the school. And the guy came in and he just started yelling at the teacher after he saw the snowflakes. He was yelling at her in Arabic. She didn't know Arabic, so I'm not sure why he was doing that, but I remember it very clearly. And he then took a pair of scissors and cut one of the tips off of each of the snowflakes. This is the first time that I'd actually ever seen this happen. This was my introduction to something very new. So he cut this off, and then we started asking the teacher, obviously all of us, wondering, why he amputated our snowflakes, and all these little pieces of paper on the ground. And then she told us, it's because of the Star of David. Very reluctly, she didn't know how to talk about it, so she said it was because the Star of David has 6 points, and these snowflakes symbolize the Star of David. Wanted to know what the Star of David is.
Yeah, hell of a conspiracy theory that God would use the crystalline nature of snowflakes to spread the Zionistic.
It is. Everything is. Everything's
Not too different from what you read online right now, actually.
Yeah, I know. We had, you cut some off, and I don't know. This is our introduction to the Jews. Okay, this is how we grew up. We're in Saudi Arabia. We're relatively isolated from the local culture. We're in an American school. We're sort of siloed in this relatively liberal Western sort of microcosm within the city. And we are, this is my introduction to the Jews living there. Went home, asked my dad about it. He told me about the Israel-Palestine conflict. That's really a lot what most people know there about the Jews. They don't really know it in any other context, really. So we had a globe that we got from a bookstore called Al Jarir bookstore in downtown Riyadh. It was like an inflatable globe, so he just kind of pulled it out, and he showed me, where Israel and Palestine were on the map, and there was no Israel on that map. So this is something that we bought there locally. There's no Israel. There's actually no Palestine either. This was a weird map. I mean, it's not like the people making this were very sophisticated as geographers, but it was just a little notch in the Mediterranean Sea. So yeah, that was my introduction to the Jews. I never really knew anybody growing up. I think I was in my 20s when I actually met my first real life Jewish person, and that was in Canada. And I remember what a shock it was when he told me. He came in and he had what I thought was an Arabic accent, so I thought he was probably Iraqi or something. I was working at a convenience store at the time, surprise, surprise, So I have to talk about stereotypes. So I'm sitting there, this guy comes in and he's like, he started talking to me. I was studying for something. I was in medical school at the time, so I was studying microbiology actually. And then he asked me about it, and I told him I go to med school. He's like, all right. So he started asking me for advice. What should I do? My son wants to go. I'm like, so where's your son? And he's like, oh, he's back home in Israel. And then I had this, like Spitz, I had this visceral, weird reaction that I couldn't, and I didn't have any, like, I didn't agree with everything that they said about Jewish people. I used to watch Woody Allen movies. I was, a lot of the comedians, a lot of the like Mel Brooks, all these people, they were all sort of Jewish. So I didn't have anything against anyone really. So and I'm also secular, as you know. I was secular there too. I didn't really believe in religion of any kind. So I'm now, really my muscles are all contracted. I've got sweaty palms. My heart's racing. I'm like, okay, well, it was a very strange reaction, like just growing up that way. It's interesting.
It's quite a contrast to mine, because despite this heavy indoctrination, if you will, within the synagogue's Hebrew school and everything associated with it, I grew up in a lower middle class Chicago suburb. Yeah. So we had Indian neighbors next door. We had Germans. We had tons of African Americans. We were right on the border of Skokie and Evanston. And we had Arab neighbors. And we were this hotbed of diversity at the public school, in the playground, and throughout my upbringing. And then that was in juxtaposition to this enclave where we learned about us, our tradition, our history, and the importance of Zionism. And we all balanced this out. We were kids. We went to Hebrew school. That's what they taught us. And we experienced this American melting pot, literally, of diversity. Yeah. And when we fast forward a little bit, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, American Jews have that dichotomy almost built into us, especially liberal or to the left of center American Jews. I would probably say there's a majority of us, where on the one hand, we are very secular. On the other, we embrace diversity. We love critical thinking, fitting stereotypes, right? Yeah. And all of this is generally true. We love a good argument. But
that's great. I'm working in my stereotype's working in a convenience store, and yours is critical thinking.
And our stereotype is, look at all the Nobel Prizes. Well, you got all these Nobel Prize winners and their families, but the second you utter the magic spell Israel, there's a transformation in almost all of us, where the critical thinking, the open-mindedness, the objectivity, and the embrace of problem solving is done. And a lot of the mantras that we grew up with, that have become embedded with us and are synonymous with our identity, with our tribe, are instantly activated. And you're seeing that play out right now in terms of how American Jews are viewing this most intense and extreme of Middle East conflicts. And I find that both fascinating and kind of frustrating. Because unlike yourself, we grew up with diversity. We were champions of civil rights in the United States, allied closely with African Americans in their struggle, most recently with LGBTQ. And that sense of progressive liberalism, at least in the humanistic backbone of what it constitutes to be an American Jew, vaporizes instantaneously when it's ever called into question that Israel is doing anything wrong. And I know I'm painting kind of a stark picture, but I think most American Jews would nod and relate that Israel is the exception to every rule. And because it's the foundational core of who we are, drilled into us, that Zionism is Israel, that Israel is Judaism, and that our destiny as the chosen people is predicated by the success and security of Israel. Done. End of story. And that's how you see a lot of the churn that's going on. And I find it twistful and frustrating.
No, and I think that this is one of the things I really want to dig into more, because I don't think we hear about it a lot, is that the way that we are raised, the stories that we're told, the way that we are indoctrinated, even though like, again, for me, it was just sort of peripheral. It's where I was living. It wasn't that my family was like that, or that the school I went to was like that. But the fact that I had such a visceral reaction and such a sort of a difficult and a tense reaction to, when I met that man at the convenience store the first time, it makes me think, like, there are other kids there that didn't go to an international school. They didn't have like a sort of a moderate liberal family. They grew up in Saudi schools learning Arabic. They were taught these things officially, which we weren't. And if I had that kind of reaction, what are these kids growing up with? Is it their fault? The way that we grow up thinking the things that we do, the sort of tribal nature of it. If I was born, or if, most people who are, pro-Palestine, if they were born in an Israeli family, or if Bibi Netanyahu was born into a family in the West Bank, Gaza, wouldn't he be as staunchly pro-Palestinian as he is, sort of pro-Israeli right now? Like, a lot of this stuff is just, it's divided down these tribal lines, and it doesn't really feel like a lot of it is about what's right and wrong. It's a lot of it is about, what our side is doing right and how we're being blamed and victimized for it, and what our side is doing right, and for both sides. So that's a difficult issue. It's not like your usual debate, ideological debate, right? This is really more about tribal loyalty than it is about any kind of sort of reason.
Absolutely. And the proof of how emotional and irrational and reactive, exactly what you're saying, is accurate, is the self-destruct that happens and that I've been experiencing as an American Jew who ostensibly supports Israel and the Western values that we share. So specifically, I oftentimes come across as either sympathetic to Hamas or the wicked son of the Passover, where I'm the self-loathing Jew because I would criticize some of Israel's decisions. And that, again, is proof that what's operating here is a knee-jerk tribal reaction and self-defense mechanism. So, for example, as an American Jew who believes that Israel does have a right to exist, that Israel does recognize and really embody a lot of the values that both you and I hold true, despite all that, I feel that some of Israel's actions has been at cross purposes to its own aims. And if you check out my Medium articles, and we could talk about some of the specificities, I think much of the reaction and overreaction to Hamas attack of October 7th, which, by the way, was specifically designed to bait Israel into the catastrophe that's unfolding day to day on our front pages. When I bring up some of these ideas, my friends, my colleagues, my family are reactive in a way that negates any sense of reason to me or common sense. And when we try to have that critical, rational conversation that as American Jews we're so damn good at and stereotyped as embodying, everything breaks down. And it's incredibly frustrating because you could project that same sense of almost dizzying fury all the way up to the senior leadership in Israel. And the result is, I think, catastrophic in the sense that the reputation of Israel, the rise and eruption of anti-Semitism, anti-Israeli, and anti-US sentiment throughout the world, I think is a direct consequence of Jews being really unable to sort some of this out and look at what they're doing rationally and strategically.
Yeah. So let's move into that, because I think that there's a you wrote about this, right? So you wrote about how the experience of American Jews, you call them, there's the militant Zionists, right? A lot of them are right wing, and then you had the leftist apologists, right? And how there's this sort of schism, and there isn't really a whole lot of middle ground with American Jews. So my position, actually, we agree on this, which is this is something that you're not going to see a whole lot on the Piers Morgan show. Is that we have we come from very different backgrounds, but I think we both agree that the October 7th attack, as you said, was horrific. There's nothing that justifies it, but it was baked, and it was designed specifically. And the really horrific nature of it was designed to really sow seeds of hate for generations and generations at a time when when Israel was like normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia, normalizing relationships with the UAE, with a lot of the other Middle Eastern sort of Arab countries. So it came at that time, and Israel did take the bait. And now what they're doing, what's happening in Gaza, is just I just don't see the justification for just everything that we're seeing with, it's almost, it feels like a war on children. I know it's not deliberate. They talk about Hamas using, civilians as human shields. And that almost is coming across like now with the scale of it. It almost sounds like an excuse now to be able to do whatever they want. So I think that I just don't see anything good happening anywhere right now. So it's very difficult for me to say, but I think that we do have some points of agreement. We're probably going to have some points of disagreement too. But so can you talk a little bit about the militant Zionists and the leftist apologists?
The foundation of it, we could look at it through the activities of October 7th moving forward. So by definition, asymmetrical warfare is fought between a David and Goliath kind of scenario. So Hamas is underarmed, underpopulated compared to the Israeli Defense Forces. So what was looming at the time was the signing of the Israeli-Saudi security deal, which I don't know why that wasn't front page news, but unprecedented and amazing in terms of expanding the Abraham Accords that were signed earlier between Israel, Bahrain, and the UAE, which was basically an attempt for Israel to ally itself with pretty much most of the Sunni Arab world. So Israel was on the brink of signing this security deal, which would have actually precipitated a nuclear reactor in Saudi Arabia, if you can believe that, run by Americans. But how's that for a hedge against the Iranian nuclear program?
Right.
You had an environment where Palestine was pretty much forgotten. There was a belief all the way up to the highest rungs of Israeli, US governments, and even the Saudi government that the Palestinians could be ignored in the peace process.
Mm-hmm.
And Hamas made its move. And the way it made its move was, as you mentioned, to go full ISIS. So they breached the barrier. Netanyahu was distracted with defending his illegal settlements in the West Bank. Netanyahu pretty much had used Hamas as a hedge against the two-state solution because of their rivalry with the Palestinian Authority, and didn't consider Hamas a real threat, which was reinforced by Hamas's bluff over the last year and a half, 2 years of playing nice with Israel. So we all know what happened October 7th. 1,500 or so Hamas militants crossed the border. They raped, they burned, they beheaded, absolutely unprecedented massacre in Israel. And why did Hamas do that? Hamas did it because they knew that the savagery and breadth of that kind of attack would precipitate a predictable extreme reaction on the part of the Israelis. By bombing the hell out of Gaza and subsequently invading, they knew that thousands of Palestinian men, women, and especially children would be caught up in the churn of collateral damage. They knew that half of the people on the planet get their news from TikTok, and that everything is being live streamed in real time. And they knew that the information war is way more significant to win than a military one. So predictably, Israel reacted 100, 1,000 times. You've got 40, 50, 60,000 IDF troops right now in Gaza. You've had the ongoing hostage negotiations. You've had a ceasefire, but you know it's going to resume with even more ferocity. So that's the backdrop of what's going on right now. And to your question, there have always been two sides to American Jewry, what I call the militant Zionists. And their point of view is similar as I described. Every move Israel makes is justified due to its need for self-preservation. Any criticism of Israel is automatically anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic.
And pro-Hamas.
And pro-Hamas, and go for it. And on the other side, and this side was much less prominent when I grew up, but it's become significant, especially among younger people, especially with the generation who have no historical context of the Middle East, is what I call the leftist apologists.
Yeah.
And these tend to be progressive liberal folks who self-identify with the victim, with the disenfranchised, and ironically enough, are siding not only with Palestinians, but often with Hamas in terms of branding Israel, an apartheid state, the oppressor. I personally know young American Jews who are actively going to pro-Palestine protests and basically outraged as to what Israel's been doing, to the point where they invert their own values, downplay or ignore Hamas's atrocities, and flip everything around. So you have these two camps in American Jewry. And there is a middle ground. But if you talk to most American Jews, you'll notice that the light bulb's going to go off.
Yeah.
They're going to get more and more militant in their Zionism the more you talk about these issues. Or they're going to get more leftist apologetic in terms of assigning blame to Israel and being increasingly sympathetic to not only the Palestinians, but often Hamas itself.
There are polls right now that are showing a generational divide there too, between you're talking about the militant Zionists and the leftist apologists. That there is a generational divide where the younger people, as you're saying, the TikTok crew, they tend to be more on the leftist apologist side, and right now, at least half of them or more, people. Americans, not just Jews, but just overall American youth, is sympathizing with the Palestinians, which has never happened before. I grew up in the 80s when we didn't have social media, we didn't have all these streaming video and everything, and we had our time in Newsweek and New York Times, USA Today, and then they sort of printed where the journalists were. Everything was sort of, we just heard one side of the story. We didn't really know.
Yeah, and American was bipartisan. The Republicans and the Democrats had unilateral, unequivocal, ubiquitous support for
pro-Israel.
Never contested.
But yeah, so here's the thing. Now you have the social media, which has become sort of like a printing press, in terms of exposing and making the world transparent and giving everybody a voice. And what I've seen in the last few weeks on TikTok and on Instagram and so on, like these videos that all these younger people watching, I have never seen stuff like this before. I've never seen children. Yeah, so there is, and I know, like there's a cultural difference here too. The October 7th raw footage, they showed it to a closed room of journalists. They never really showed anybody the graphic stuff. But here in Palestine, it's different. They're live streaming these things. I've seen videos of kids my daughter's age, 7 or 8 years old, with their just arms ripped open, bones exposed.
I see them too, Ali. It's like just go on TikTok, and the social platforms now are, X is its own thing with Musk, right?
Yeah.
But TikTok isn't filtering. They'll filter pornography, but they will not filter graphic violence.
They don't. But there's also, so here's the thing, and these things are real. I mean, they're happening. They're happening live, because you know what bombs do to regular people, what bombs do to kids. And now, so this is happening. These images, one after the other, relentlessly every single day, kid after kid after kid. And when you see that, a lot of these kids, right, watching it, whether they're Jewish or Muslim or American, whatever they are, they don't know that this is the only thing they know about the conflict. They don't know about even 9/11. I mean, they don't even remember 9/11. They don't know the history of what happened. They don't know the nuances. They don't, like, the Holocaust is like a century ago for them. All they're seeing, this is a completely new visual history that's being written for them, and it's devastating to Israel. So there's a question about moral equivalence, right? That, okay, Hamas wants to, if Hamas, the reason that Hamas can't destroy, to kill all the Jews because it can't do it, but Israel doesn't want to do it, but it's happening because of the human shields and all of these other reasons. But that, when you see these children, you see these images, the question of moral equivalence doesn't come into your mind. All you see is yourself in that situation with your child, right?
Yeah,
and it's Hamas, devastating to Israel. It's Hamas. Yeah, I know Hamas designed, like, this is why
engineered to engender these streams of graphic content of Palestinian kids being crushed, dismembered, and blown up. Yeah. And it's working. Here's my source of frustration, which is my criticism of Israel is their callous disregard of Palestinian civilians, not even from a moral vantage point, because we can argue that forever, but for the very reason that we're talking about right now. The court of global public opinion is shifting radically in the direction away from the best interests of the United States, Israel, and Jews. Mm-hmm. And it's being fueled by the steady stream of content as you described. And to your point, Hamas engineered this entire catastrophe to create exactly that result. So what I get pushback is, well, Hamas is using the human shields and Israel needs to kill Hamas. All right, where the hell did a little bit of common sense and creativity go? If you've got a terrorist driving a bus full of women and children through downtown Tel Aviv, right? Are you going to just say, fuck it, and take out the driver regardless of the consequences? Mm-hmm. So Israel is vengeful, is angry. That's fueling part of this. They also historically have never cared about global public opinion because correctly they assume that most of the world hates them and is anti-Semitic. Okay, mm-hmm. But times have changed. Israel is much more vulnerable than it was even in 1948, 1967, 1973. It's surrounded by enemies like never before. It has this tight relationship with the United States, which is also being fissured by this very subject. Mm-hmm. And they continue to just, again, drop bunker buster bombs in the middle of a refugee camp. So I asked myself, you don't want to do what your enemy planned for you to do. Hamas knew you would react this way, and hell's bells, fuck it if there's tens of thousands of women and children in the way. And it also begs the question of a little bit of patience and creativity. And it's a sad death calculus that the IDF is making between the value of one IDF soldier as opposed to the value of 500 Palestinian kids. Because they could be more targeted. They could be calmer and more methodical in their reaction, but they have chosen not to. And the consequences are dire for Israel. And now it's dire for the United States because it isn't just Rashida Tlaib who is creating a fissure in the Democratic Party, going on Twitter and announcing that if you don't do what we tell you to do vis-a-vis Israel, Mr. Joe Biden, Mr. Genocide Joe, then I'm going to take my own constituents out of Dearborn, a critical swing state, and let Trump win, okay? Yeah. So it's reverberating through American politics. This isn't just an issue for American Jews squabbling amongst ourselves. This is Israel precipitating an enormous breakdown in the values that they themselves are trying to espouse. And meanwhile, you've got all those dead kids, and you've got a war with no clear end game. We got to destroy Hamas. All right. How are you going to do that? Now, thanks to the ceasefire engendered by this tortuous hostage exchange, they're assimilating into the south, into the civilian population. Israel has kicked ass in the north. They lay siege, right? And they took control fairly rapidly. Looked good from a military perspective. But the guerrilla war is only beginning. And if you think for a second that the IDF is going to calm down too much and listen to the Americans at this point, with all this pent-up rage, with the humiliation of the hostage deals, right, and with Hamas running loose throughout the rest of Gaza, I don't think so. And that's the source of my frustration.
Yeah. Well, what are you, how are you seeing, I'm trying to put myself in, like, if I was Israeli, right? If I were Israeli, I would be furious at the Netanyahu government. Like, absolutely.
They are.
And there's not, whether it's a short-term thing of, the way that he's been, what's happened with the hostages, and everybody's, like 80%. I mean, there's the huge numbers of Israelis say that he's got to go, after this thing is over. But just, if you look back, just a few decades ago, over what he's been doing just in the last, decade or so, during the Obama administration, like you said, there was a time when the U.S., Democrats, Republicans, everybody was just allied and unwavering in their support of Israel. Right? Everybody was. And they said it, no matter what, we stand with Israel, all the time. During the Obama years, Netanyahu started alienating half of that support. He actually started alienating the Democrats. You know, he came to the U.S., he addressed Congress. You know, he snubbed Biden when he went to visit there. There's a lot of things that he did.
Yeah, and the opposite happened under Trump.
Yeah. So he did the exact. But what he did was that he essentially decided that, okay, here's the one of the few bipartisan, you know, the one of the few issues that has bipartisan support in the U.S. and has had for decades. And I want to cut that support in half. And he did that. And then there's also schisms between, and then again, like most American Jews vote Democrat. So there's, you know, the schism in the American Jewish diaspora as well. So there's and then now, you know, the way that he's been taking this bait and the way that he's running this war, where these images are not going to go out of the minds of these kids. I mean, these are things that we don't even let our kids see in CGI.
They're seeing them anyway. They all see them. They all see them. It's TikTok for 5 minutes, and you'll see on the one hand IDF soldiers putting their bullets in pig fat. So the Hamas militants get maybe 20 virgins instead of 72 on the one hand, and then you see the other point of view. Yeah. And oftentimes there's just value neutral videos of horrific death and suffering. So you don't need a soundtrack for that. You don't need any kind of soundtrack for what's coming out of Gaza.
That's the immediate effect, but it's also this is also a vehicle to certain kinds of propaganda. I mean, when people see these, like a lot of young people, they see these images, they go and they talk to people, you know, who are on that side, like, you know, what you're going through, tell us about it. And then when they tell them about, you know, the occupation, the settlements, and the history, and they talk about apartheid, and they talk about, you know, genocide and everything, and a lot of these things just become they're getting their account of history from the side that's victimized, because they don't trust the other side. So there's also an information issue here. There's the way that history is being written for a lot of these younger people. I mean, they're going and, you know, they're finding a Bin Laden letter, and they think that, you know, he's some, I don't know, super climate, you know, supporter and feminist.
And you blame the shitty American, you know, educational system. Where's the history? Where's the civics? Right. And with most sources of information coming from their peers, coming from social media, and it lacks any real depth or context.
Yeah. So I want to know what you think the next step is, not just in terms of the war and what's going to happen after that, but there's the currency for the modern time now is attention, right? You got attention, you got everything. You have a whole generation of kids who are just sort of turning against you, seeing these images. What is Israel's? What do you think Israel can do to turn that the public relations? I don't want to like trivialize it by calling it PR, but, you know, just its impression overall in the world. How do they? I mean, they don't.
I think there's good news and bad news for Israel. The good news is the setup that came, frankly, from the Trump administration in terms of no longer trying to appease both sides. So the Middle East peace process was stagnated and completely stalled for decades because the U.S. played this balancing act between the Palestinians and the Israelis and the surrounding Arab countries, trying to appease everybody. And Trump's point of view, frankly, was, why? Let's unabashedly marginalize and make irrelevant the Palestinians. And since Iran is enemy number one, the shared enemy of Israel and the United States and Saudi Arabia, and since we have so many legacy ties too, deep ones, to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, let's side with the Sunni side of the street for the most part, and unabashedly pick a side and go for it. And that explains the success of these peace deals. Mm-hmm. Iran is everyone's enemy on this side of the house. And we are allied with Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Qatar does this balancing act, right? Because they're playing both sides, and move forward from there. So although the Israeli-Saudi deal is halted, I don't think it's been permanently taken off the table. I think everyone is waiting for this horrific war and its images to blow over. And to your point, attention spans last only as long as the next TikTok video.
That's true too.
So I think Israel, from a political point of view, unless all hell breaks loose, right? Notice Hezbollah did not declare war because, Xi called the mullahs in Iran and said, "Don't cut off my oil." Yeah. China does not want a major war in the Middle East because they're too dependent on the oil and their economy is too frail. So I think it just trickled down, which is no war, no. So that was Hamas's biggest disappointment, that Hezbollah didn't go apeshit in Lebanon, right? But you are seeing all these outbreaks in the West Bank. And of course, Gaza is going to degenerate into a horrific guerrilla conflict for at least another year. But that all said, these deals are still in place. And the broader picture of this geopolitical alliance between the U.S., NATO, Israel, and now Saudi Arabia and most of the Sunni side of the street, as opposed to who? Russia. Putin's very happy about the Gaza war. So it's Russia, China, Iran, Syria, North Korea, right? So that's the new world order that's shaking, with India kind of in the middle, right? They play ball on both sides. They're buying tons of Russian oil. They don't want to pick a side. So you have that geopolitical game that's being played, and Israel still has a profound role in that. So I think Israel will probably be okay moving forward, which justifies a lot of the savagery in Gaza, which is like, fuck it. You know what I mean? Let's go for it.
They're going to hate us anyway.
They're going to hate us anyway. And what difference is it going to make 6 months, a year, 2 years from now? There's too much money and there's too much power at stake, and we're not going anywhere. So that's kind of good news. The bad news for Israel is what you're saying in terms of this upwelling of global anti-Semitism, anti-U.S. sentiment, and anti-Israeli sentiment. And what that is fueling, and that has been the Hamas goal from the second they blew up the fences and rolled in on October 7th, was to precipitate global opinion, not even shifting, but erupting in this way, so that they can get the Palestinian cause back on the table. And that is an inevitability. So I've been of the opinion throughout my entire adult life that the Israeli notion of favoring a two-state solution is mostly bullshit. And the reason for that is, why would Israel want to negotiate and give up any power, especially with such a large population so geographically tied to their own territory? The second the Palestinians get their own state, they're going to get their own army. And Israel is too small, and the existential risk is too high to give the Palestinians autonomy and statehood. And Netanyahu was a firm believer in that. And that explains pitting Hamas against the Palestinian Authority and playing these games. It also motivates him to keep building settlements in the West Bank. They're illegal, but fuck it. There's no two-state solution. We don't want it, and we never did. Well, Guess what? Guess what? The biggest win for Hamas out of this entire clusterfuck is world opinion putting the Palestinian cause back front and center. And everyone from Trudeau to the German chancellor is talking about the two-state solution. There was no talk about the two-state solution on October 6th, and now everyone is talking about it. So
yeah, I mean, there was an assumption that it was dead.
Right.
There's assumption that it was dead, and the thing is, like, there is a, from and this is the biggest problem, I think, where the settlement expansion and the sort of the Likud charter, which is very like the Hamas charter and the Likud charter, both when that slogan from from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which essentially means no more Israel. But then Likud
it
also
literally means, and newsflash everybody, when anyone ever says that, they mean wipe Israel off the map. There's absolutely no ambiguity about that.
But in the Likud charter, right, it says that from the Jordan River to the sea, Israel will have sovereignty, which also rhymes. So that's exactly what it says. So now you've got this. There is the issue of the occupation, and this is a really, really difficult thing. And I'll tell you, this is growing up there. There's a lot of factors here. First of all, a lot of people, especially the young people, still don't know that Egypt controls the southern border of Gaza, but they've never really helped out when it comes to them. They cooperate with Israel.
They hate the Palestinians.
Egyptians don't like the Palestinians. Like they actually
don't. Most of the Arabs don't, and that's not a Jew just saying that that's a fact.
In Saudi Arabia, it's actually a generational thing. So you've got MBS. It was the crown prince. His father's generation had this sort of like this. We have to stand by the Palestinian cause is our cause. It was a big thing. There was this Arab solidarity. The younger generation doesn't care. The younger generation, not like because they had oil, so they were insulated from everything. Now he's like, well, the world isn't as dependent on our oil. It's going to decrease. So we've got this vision 2030. We got to open up, mingling between the sexes, movie theaters. We're going to have concerts. We're going to have Formula One races. We're going to do all of this stuff here in Saudi Arabia, make it a modern country. Yeah. So we're not. So we can't deal with this. We need economic ties with the other more powerful, countries in the region. That includes Israel. It's also like a front against Iran, and they don't really care. Like, what does Gaza have? Gaza, everything like 80-90%, pretty much everything that they use is imported, right? I mean, they don't
love that it's a thorn in the side of Israel. So don't get me wrong. The allegation that there's ravenous anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism throughout the entire region, inclusive of Saudi Arabia, is a fact. But it's about real. It's about real politique. It's about pragmatic ingredients. That's all.
But there are two things. So like there's two narratives that I hear over here again, especially with the young people, right? Is that there's this one narrative that there's everybody is anti-Semitic. The Arabs are anti-Semitic. They all want to destroy Israel. So that's one narrative. The other narrative is what Israel's doing is terrible. They've occupied the Palestinians. They're building settlements. They also there's apartheid. They have different rights. They don't have the right to vote. They control their food and water and all everything. Yeah. So the thing is, all of those things are true. Right. All of those things are true. Yes, what Israel's doing, the occupation is horrible. Okay, the settlement expansion is horrible. The way that they're conducting this war is absolutely atrocious. It's it's basically a war crime, I think. But at the same time, the Arabs do. There's a lot of anti-Semitism in the Arab world. There's a lot of anti-Semitism in the Muslim world. I had one of my relatives, extended family. I'm not going to name him or point him out because it's going to be a problem. But he just didn't accept that Einstein, because Einstein's obviously one of the biggest geniuses of all time. You and I know why. He's like, oh, he only got the Nobel Prize because he was Jewish. That's the way that they think about these things.
Hitler never got the A-bomb.
Yeah.
So there's good news behind that.
There is, they're protected by, So there's these things are, both of these things are true, and there's and you're right. Like the occupation and the settlement expansion is criminal, but if there is a two-state solution yet, when the Palestinians get their own army, it is an existential threat. I mean, when you've got people coming from after World War II, they find there's a lot.
It's even worse now, Ali, because Israel just blew the shit out of them. Do you think the people who survive, like 2% of Gaza are dead? You know what I mean? It's worse than COVID in Gaza, and it's all F-15s dropping bunker busters on refugee camps.
And instead of the old people, it's the kids.
So this is a cross-generational engine of Arab radicalization. The IDF is doing Hamas the biggest favor in the world by blowing the shit out of Palestinian civilians. And that's just the fact. So, the two-state solution, again, is front and center. Is it going to go away? I'm not so sure after this.
Yeah.
And Israel will be held accountable. And at the same time, it's a parallel track, thanks to what's going on right now. The hatred for Israel is exponentially increasing. And again, you could say they hate us anyway, and whatever we do, they're always going to want to destroy us. All right, but let's just be realistic. That is this campaign in Israel's best interest in the way they're conducting it. That's all I'm saying. And sure, Hamas has got to go. Hamas is worst for the Palestinian people. Instead of schools and businesses and parks, they built tunnels. Not good for the Palestinians.
There's a perspective issue too. When if Bashar al-Assad was Jewish, right? The people would have noticed what happened in Syria a lot more.
What about MBS in Yemen?
MBS in Yemen, Omar al-Bashir in Darfur. So we do have the
worst, right? No one cared about Saudi Arabia bombing the living shit out of Yemen.
Yeah,
what about Assad killing his own people by the millions? 95% of Syria was displaced.
half a million kids there. Darfur, like Arab Muslims killing black Muslims, like
Jews
500,000 there.
News, buddy. Jews are news. My people are news.
But at the same time, so that's what's happening with that. Like if they were Jewish, then everybody would be against them too, a lot more than they were. But at the same time, if Bashar al-Assad and those guys were doing, if an Arab leader was doing what the Netanyahu government is doing in Gaza, and none of the Western countries would believe
no
that.
one would give a shit, and that's
they would. No, they wouldn't.
Nationalization for the militant Zionists. The militant. Like, look what Assad did. Look what MBS did. So fuck you. You got a double standard.
That's what they're doing now. But I'm telling you, if exactly what Netanyahu's doing, if Assad or an Arab leader had done that, right, then no one would believe that they weren't deliberately targeting children. So this is something that I think this is also true right now.
It doesn't matter. I don't think the IDF is deliberately targeting Palestinian civilians. They're just in the way, and they don't give a shit. Remember the hospital drama that was a few weeks ago? Imagine that hospital in Tel Aviv, and you got a bunch of terrorists in the hospital, and they're digging tunnels and stuff. Do you think they cut the power?
No, I agree. I don't think
with Jews. No, they don't give a shit.
And I don't think this. Yeah,
right.
I don't. That's why I don't think this whole, there's no moral equivalence argument. I just don't think it works. I don't think it works here. There you could have, who's got the moral high ground, who's deliberately doing it, who's not deliberately doing it. If you're just saying, okay, we can accept this, we can accept this anyway.
But all of this is a moot point, because when people go on TikTok, they see the dead babies. All right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. History doesn't matter. You could revise everything, the Balfour Declaration, where the Jews were right, where we were wrong, how the Arabs were thrown out, how they were thrown in, blah, blah, blah. All these endless arguments about history. None of that matters. And all these arguments about moral equivalence, none of it matters. We have to focus on the pragmatic impact of what's going on. And the information war is more significant than the military one. And who gives a shit about the history? It's 2023. This is what makes me crazy.
The history is being rewritten.
What's important.
It's being rewritten like now. So I wanted to.
Everyone's dicking and yakking.
Yeah.
But,
So I want to move on. I know we're over time, but I wanted to keep this going for a little bit longer because I wanted to hear what you thought of this. Just Israel's future in terms of, I think you may have heard of the demographic time bomb and the sustainability.
Big time.
Yeah. So let's talk about the occupation. So the whole idea is that the majority of, and this is another thing, all the people who say apartheid, they don't know that people still don't know this, that 1 in 5 Israelis is Arab. Right?
Yeah, 20% of the population.
And they're in the government. And there are issues. I'm going to acknowledge that there are issues. I've talked to several of them. There are issues with everything from marriage laws to checkpoints to employment opportunities, economic issues. There are, but that is a fact. All right. So there's now you have 20% of Israel that is Arab. You've got the Palestinian population, the West Bank and Gaza. And if you have a single binational state, right, then for it to be a Jewish state, right, you can't give all of the Arabs the vote. If all of the Arabs in the binational now united state of Israel have the vote, there's no Jewish state. So Israel is eventually going to have to choose between being a democracy or being a Jewish state, just because of the population dynamics. That's why a lot of the sort of the religious settlers are encouraged to reproduce and have loads and loads of kids.
Well, they're already running it, Ali. The average reproductive rate of the Orthodox community in Israel, I think, is 6 kids per family. And I think that's literally an average. They're like, we grew up like that. God showed the rainbow to Noah, which was basically like, go out there and breed, So just knock it out, invade Canaan, stake the claim, and then just proliferate because you're the chosen people. So the Orthodox Jews are the other demographic variable in Israel, but it also, begs the question of democracy. Mm-hmm. They don't serve in the army, they don't pay taxes, and then they just read the Talmud all day. And that's not a cynical evaluation. That's true. So they're pulling down on Israeli society, and they're the biggest, fastest growing demographic on the Jewish side, and they're militant Zionists.
And they have a lot of influence.
Ravenously militant.
and Netanyahu has had to ally himself with them just to win elections, and so they have a tremendous amount of influence on the government too. So there's and on policy and all of that. So there's this question of how long is, for Israel, a country with that wants to be a Western country with Western values, how long is this occupation and settlement and expansion sustainable? Like, how long do they go without giving this entire population, about 50% of their population in the West Bank and Gaza?
Well, according to Netanyahu, indefinitely, right? So the idea of mowing the lawn, okay? Yeah. So what happens is it's an unstable kinetic environment, Gaza, West Bank, even Golan in the north, and it's frothy and it's contentious and it's ready to blow. And then the pressure builds up 6 months, a year and a half, and then there's a spark, an attack, an incident, several, and then the IDF comes in and mows the lawn, and then the heat goes back down. And it's for decades, whether it's the intifadas, the rollout into Lebanon, you look at all of the wars and battles, it's really the same thing. It's the steam building up in Israel and the region, and the IDF mowing the lawn. Well, here's why this could be a major tipping point. There's never been an attack of this unprecedented scope and savagery. Israel traded 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for one IDF soldier. Yeah. Now Israel had 1,200 of their own citizens butchered and more than 250 taken hostage. It's a mind-blowing experience for all Israelis. They're utterly freaked out. And we've been talking for the last bit about world opinion and about Hamas's objectives to get the Palestinian cause, the two-state. They don't give a shit about the two-state solution, by the way, which is another variable. Hamas does not want a two-state solution. They want Israel.
Hamas wants they want the same thing. They want a state.
There is no politics with Hamas. They're not negotiating for a two-state solution. And this is a key ideological difference between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Hamas does not want Israel to exist, period. Palestinian Authority, Abbas, They're willing to play ball. So, what do you do with that? And to, I think, in a sense, answer your question in the easiest way possible, you've got this intense demographic situation in Israel with the populations shifting. You got to shift away from democracy, right? We had all that going on October 6th. Israel was fragmented, splintered, hundreds of thousands of people protesting, and the southern border abandoned because most of the force strength was in the West Bank. They got caught with their pants down for all this reason. So what is the future of Israel? And I think Hamas right now tipped the scale. And that's the biggest output and result of the trajectory we're on right now. Literally unprecedented in terms of Israel being put up against the wall and being forced to negotiate and figure it out.
Yeah,
this is the ultimate culmination is a two-state solution. I don't see how they can get around it, and it's going to be tricky. In concept, it sounds great, but the place is small, and now after blowing up all these kids, you're going to have a whole bunch of more Arabs who are going to hate you even more. So what is the future? And that's the source of my frustration. Why are they playing it this way? There's no future thinking. It's mowing the lawn. People in the IDF see this as a big lawn mowing experience. It's not. I think everything has changed.
Yeah, I think everything has changed too. I think this is going to be like a big turning point. There's a choice that they have to make right now between, because you've got they've not just committed this sort of like massacre of 1,200 Jews on October 7th, but they've also taken hostages. So you've got both. So now you have two stated aims. One is that we have to destroy Hamas, and the second is we have to get our hostages back. And they're going to have to choose one or the other. Not going to be able to do both. I mean, you have, Hamas is going to keep on releasing, like trickling hostages back to Israel to keep a ceasefire, regroup in the south of Gaza, do all of that, and then they're not going to like what's going to they're going to have to choose. Israel's going to have to choose again, and this is not it's just the whole thing.
Israel's already chosen, Ali. They've decided. The only reason there was a ceasefire at all is because of the grassroots movement in Israel to bring them home. Hashtag bring them home. Netanyahu was under tremendous internal pressure to appease the families of the hostage victims. Mm-hmm. The IDF never wanted it, and they're humiliated. And every time you see any post, and I see it among my friends and family, of showcasing the 4-year-old, the mother and daughter, the smiling hostages. From a humanistic point of view, of course, it's wonderful. But from a strategic point of view, it's another punch in the face by Hamas, which is like, look, world, look how humane we are. We're willing to negotiate. It's the fucking Israelis who are the oppressor fascists. And if they only calm down, this is what could happen. And the Israelis know this. And it's humiliating, and they're infuriated. And like I said, it never would have happened if there wouldn't have been that grassroots movement, I'm convinced. And they're going to go back. The ceasefire ends, I think, tomorrow, as of this recording. Maybe a few more hostages might trickle out, a day or two more. But this war is going to, mark my words, is going to reignite with equal, if not greater, ferocity. Because the Israelis are incensed by this. They never wanted it. And they're hell-bent on killing each and every last one of the Hamas guys, regardless of circumstance.
That's the thing with going back to what you're saying about asymmetric warfare. When you have a sort of a grassroots army like Hamas, and they come out, there's a value system that's different too. I mean, when I hear them talking about, we're both sort of secular people. When I hear them talking about martyrdom, this is all about. Right. Every death is about martyrdom. The idea is that when you die in the way of God, you die in the way of a cause, nationalistic cause, religious cause, you go to a better life than you have on earth. So the life
they really believe it, and this is really believe it. The leftist apologists, especially the Jewish American ones, can't even conceive of it, and they rationalize it away. They're a theocratic, authoritarian, fascist, extremist, militant group.
They
And
are.
they
Yeah.
believe it. They believe it. And
But
that
it's like
justifies everything that they do. The kids getting crushed in the buildings.
they know that they're going to.
The Israeli
I talked
bombs are
to
going to heaven. They're all
I
going.
talked to and I will put the you know I talked to I don't know if you read it, but a pro-Taliban guy after the Peshawar in Pakistan, the Taliban went in and killed 140 school children.
Right.
And he said he told me exactly the same thing. There's a verse in the Quran. I think it's there's a verse that says, "He who dies in the way of God is not dead; they're alive. You don't see them." I think it's verse 169.
So what does this mean? It's like every dead Israeli is good for Hamas, and every dead Palestinian civilian is 100 times even better for all the reasons.
Yeah, there's nobody benefits from dead Palestinian civilians more than Hamas is. I mean, that's absolutely clear. I mean, this is not. Here's what I'm trying to. Yeah, but what I want to, so I just want to get this out there. There is a belief, when you have a belief that that life after death is better than life before death, that Gaza is an open air prison, which it is, right? And then after you die, you're going to be free. How do you fight against that? How are you going to fight against this concept of martyrdom that promises a better life after death? And how much are you going to value your life?
You cannot.
How much are you going to value life on earth?
You can't. You can't.
You can't. So, and the thing is that this is just a problem with religion in general. You know, every time you go to a funeral, even all of us, you know, oh, he's in a better place. He's smiling down on us from above. He's in a better place. Let's all go there. What are we doing here, right? This is so. If you take all of those little, you know, the platitudes that we like giving each other, and then take them to their logical conclusion, we would end up where, you know, Hamas is ending up, where, you know, you've got a better life. You've got everything that you don't have here, you're going to have later on, and you can't fight that. You can't fight that.
Hamas, see, this is the core of my frustration. You're nailing it. It's possible, folks, to hold, and especially my American Jewish friends, it's possible to hold two ideas in your fucking head at the same time. Okay? So idea number one, Hamas has got to go. I'm down for all the reasons we've been talking about. They're terrible for the Palestinians. They're terrible for everyone. And to Ali's point, they're never going to change their mind. There's no stopping them. Agreed. Idea number two, don't blow up indiscriminately thousands of Palestinian children that end up on everybody's TikTok feed.
Yeah.
That's it. Can you get there, IDF? Can you figure that out, Netanyahu? Do you have to waste Hamas tomorrow? Do you have to keep doing what you're doing? And the stuff I'm saying is not amazing. Anthony Blinken's saying it. Sullivan is saying it. The U.S. contingency and logistics people have been saying this from the first day of the operation. Use a targeted approach. Calm the fuck down. But the Israelis can't do it. They're vengeful. They're bloodthirsty after all the killing, and they don't give a shit about the Palestinians. Yeah. So they're going for it. And that's the frustration. That's the breakdown. And that's the sad reality that Israel is playing perfectly into the hands of their enemies. And how can we solve that? Well, Netanyahu, those IDF generals and propagandists that you see on video and on the nightly news, actually listen to your American counterparts this time. Because guess what? We're the ones paying for the fucking bunker buster bombs and jets that are killing all the Palestinian kids. All right? And without us, you're toast. Listen to the Americans. Calm down. Target, and then stop shooting yourself in the foot. And meanwhile, to the point of, you know, the whole discussion, I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad, wicked son Jew who is self-loathing and paradoxically anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic. Why? Because I don't want all the Palestinian civilians killed? Yes, that's true. But I just think Israel is operating against its own self-interest and taking Hamas's bait. And it's frustrating. And it's leading down a path that is existentially threatening, not only to Israel, but Trump could very well win in 2024 because he gets Michigan. Going back to our earlier conversation, because Tlaib and the rest of the leftist apologists have fractured the Democratic Party. This is having implications here.
There's a whole range of new voters that are coming into, the population would be voting for the first time, and the way that they're polling, is very different from previous generations. So anyway, I wanted to sort of wrap this up by just talking about, and we've touched on this a little bit, but what are we doing wrong in these conversations? Like people talk about this all the time. The number one thing I notice every few years, whenever this violence breaks out, everyone goes back and starts talking about the Balfour Declaration, the British Mandate, and then the 1948 and 1967, and it keeps going. And then all the different peace deals, and we offered them this, and they rejected it, and all of that. A lot of that is true. A lot of that is
back to the Cherokee. I think the Cherokee should get Nevada and Colorado.
No, I mean, look, all of those things, they're legitimate. Yes, there was the Holocaust. There's ancestral claim on this land. Generations have been born there. Many people, Palestinian and Israel, they don't have any other place to call home. All of that stuff is true. But when you go back
with this shit, to the point of our opening conversation, like not my generation, subsequent generations, Judaism, the state of Israel, the Holocaust, they're one and the same.
But you know why the world, I look at the Iranian leadership, everybody's in their 80s. The Israeli leadership, everyone's like just fucking old. These are all Joe Biden, Donald Trump, like whoever the next president's going to be is going to be. And these people, what interest could they possibly have? Really, I mean, they may think that they do, but just subconsciously, with a whole lifetime of experience, fixed ideas, grievances, what interest would they have in the future? I think that whenever we start talking about the past, and this is the biggest thing, it happens every time when people talk about Israel and Palestine, start talking about the past, there's no way you can prosecute the past. You can't retroactively make people alive again and bring back justice. You cannot get justice in the past. If you want peace, you have to let the idea of justice go. It's painful. It sucks. When you go through, when you're going in your life, in our personal life, when we say, I need to move on, I need to let this go. We're not saying that we have to go back in time and fix what screwed us over. We're saying that we need to let it go, as in give up on the idea of justice in the past in order to secure justice and peace in the future. And how are you going to, when you talk about negotiation, okay, we're going to talk about peace. We need to talk about peace. Of course, you're going to talk to people who you hate. If you like each other, you don't have to talk about it. You have to know how to talk to people that you hate. Otherwise, that's the definition of a peace deal. You have to talk to people who fucked you over, who you may have fucked over, and you need to.
Allow me to just interject with my biggest frustration for decades right now. The Israeli rationale for not really talking to and negotiating with most of their enemies is we cannot sit at the same table with an organization or with people whose mission is our destruction. Yeah. I mean, who gives a shit what their mission is, and who gives a shit what they're saying? They live right there. There's millions of them.
They're not going anywhere.
And you're not going away either. So let them propagandize, let them release mission statements, and let them talk to their own and the world with the goal of annihilating you. It's not going to make any difference, and it's not going to vaporize the several hundred nuclear warheads that you've got strategically placed throughout Israel. All right? Israel's not going anywhere. And the Arabs, the Palestinians, aren't going anywhere. So who cares what people believe? Who cares what they say?
And who cares what happened in the past?
Be pragmatic about bringing about a sustainable peace, which is not this endless cycle of oscillating violence, retribution, which, as we've seen, exponentially keeps increasing year over year. What's the next step? A nuclear weapon? What's the next step? A chemical bomb? What's the next step? You know it's going there. So now's the time, Israel. You got to do this. And and the last thing is Israel's the one holding the cards. They've got the tanks, they've got the jets, and you've got a bunch of Palestinians, in the West Bank and in Gaza. And the whole world sees it, as we were joking earlier, Ali, as like, the imperial power from Star Wars against the heroic Ewoks. That's how it's playing out. And the Ewoks won. And guess what? Hamas is winning for the exact same reason.
Yeah, it is. So I think that the conversation just needs to be, you need younger people. You also, I think, need, there's what we're doing here, sitting many miles away. There was Yuval Noah Harari said something that sort of really struck me, and I wrote about it in my Quillette article as well. Is that he said that when you're there, if you're on either side of that border and you're holding a dead child in your hands, whether you're in like a kibbutz in Israel or whether you're in Gaza, you're not thinking about moral high ground. You're seeing yourself as a victim. You're not seeing yourself in Gaza when you're holding your dead child in your hand. You're not seeing yourself as a terrorist. When you're in Israel and you're holding your dead child in your hand, you're not seeing yourself as the occupier, right? You're not looking at the numbers of how many people died here, how many people. All you know is that this is my child, and she's dead. So it's impossible for people to think of themselves as the victim and the oppressor at the same time, as the occupier and the victim at the same time, as a terrorist and the victim at the same time, right. The insurgent and the victim. It's just impossible for people to hold those thoughts in their head. So I think that now, this whole ceasefire, Biden had a lot to do with it. A lot of the negotiations are happening through Qatar. They're happening through the U.S. I don't think these two sides are capable of. I don't think they have the ability to really work with each other. And the people on the ground, usually, when you have a war, they say, well, you don't know the situation on the ground. You can't speak unless.
There's going to be no negotiation after this.
There's going to be no negotiation, but I'll tell you what there will be. Is that these alliances, the Abraham Accords, the alliances between for economic reasons, the Israelis and a lot of these Arab states, they will come back, they will go on, and they're going to continue. The only question is what happens when this happens again?
Well, the question is, what the hell happens to the Palestinians? Because
exactly, yeah.
That's the issue. They're ballast. Most of the Arab world doesn't want to have anything.
They don't care. They don't care about them. The only people they hate more than the Israelis are the Palestinians.
Yeah, and then they're happy the Palestinians have been a huge pain in the ass to the Jews from the get-go, and they're happy about that. But they're a problem for everyone, including and especially themselves. So the Palestinians need to be fixed, in the sense of given their autonomy, and a 5 by 25 mile stretch of land that forcibly contains 2.3 million people actively under siege, is not only not sustainable, but I don't want to blame the victim here. You're surprised by October 7th? You think Hamas was chilling like a villain this whole time? And the only way you're going to prevent that from happening again, regardless of whether you destroy Hamas or not, is to address the issue of the Palestinians. And like it or not, the two-state solution is now front and center, and I don't think it's going to go away too easily. It's
this is not something that started on October 7th. It didn't start in 1967. Didn't start in 1948. But I gotta say, there are people who say nothing justifies what happened on October 7th. You're right, nothing does, but nothing justifies what happened before, or what's been happening before October 7th either. Right. I mean, everything, this entire thing, nothing really justifies any of it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, comes down to.
Yeah, I remember back in 2000 when 9/11 happened, and I literally got into almost a physical confrontation with a colleague.
And you're in New York, so you were in New York, right?
No, I was in Chicago.
You
So
were
I'm
in
in
Chicago?
Chicago.
Okay.
I almost got into a physical confrontation with a colleague because I thought bin Laden's strategy and the attack of 9/11 was unbelievably strategically brilliant. And then he was infuriated that I would compliment this terror happening on our soil. What did bin Laden want to do? Okay, it's the same exact playbook. He wanted the United States to overreact and reinvade the shit out of the Middle East. So we look at Afghanistan, where we just pulled out after $1 trillion in a complete failure of epic proportion. And then we invaded the wrong goddamn country. Okay. So, and it radicalized, it precipitated the rise of ISIS. And it gave Iran Iraq, which is basically a suburb of Tehran right now. It's the exact same playbook. Hamas has been following bin Laden's playbook, and it's the essence of, as you were saying, the asymmetrical warfare. Come and get us. We're going to hit you and hit you bad, and we know you're going to overreact. Bring it, baby, bring it. And right now, you've got thousands of the Hamas mofos percolating in the south of Gaza, and they're saying the exact same thing to the IDF. Come and get us, baby. Come and get us.
Yeah. And it's,
figure it out. You're better than this.
Yeah. Bin Laden used to say that he wanted to bleed out the U.S. military. He wanted to kind of like spread them out everywhere. And so they were just basically.
It's baiting a superpower to overreact and trigger the shit out of an entire region and radicalize generations of Arabs. Yeah. And October 7th has done exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And the response to it. Well,
yeah.
I guess I think that right now that really, I know people are talking about this a lot, but I turn off now immediately when I see and any sort of podcast, any TV show when they're talking about Israel and Palestine, you've got one person's pro-Israel, one person's pro-Palestine, and they're going at it, arguing it. And it's just, I just don't think that that's at all sustainable anymore. This has to be now. The conversation has to move to the next phase. And I actually really do think, I don't think that the people on the ground there can do it, can fix it. I think
two things are necessary. Hamas has got to go, and Netanyahu has to go.
Yeah.
And Netanyahu has been, just in my humble opinion, the worst thing that perhaps has ever happened to Israel. That mofo single-handedly has fragmented Israeli society, and ultimately, and not to blame the victim here, but by all intelligence assessments, precipitated October 7th. That Operation Al-Aqsa Storm should never have been successful, let alone to the degree that it was. Israel was caught with its pants down because of Netanyahu. He was warned by his own intelligence people. He neglected those warnings because he was convinced that he had Hamas in his hands. He didn't. And everyone's playing.
He bolstered them. He funded them because he thought
he has got to go.
Gotta go. Well, I mean, yeah, he said that he was not gonna negotiate with terrorists, but then he was. He's always negotiated prisoner exchanges with Hamas, with the Palestinian Authority, who's not doing any of that. He's not negotiating.
He's an opportunistic. Again, he's an opportunistic.
Oh God, I couldn't even. Yeah, I've written about it so much, but anyway, we're gonna wrap this up. We have huh?
On that note, to all the BB fans out there.
Yeah, BB fans. I don't know how many BB fans.
The militant Zionists still love BB. You know, you look at
sure they do, but. Like you said, the militant Zionists, you wrote in one of your articles, the militant Zionists are a gift to Hamas, right? I mean,
so is Netanyahu. So was Netanyahu.
I mean, if you're Iran and you're just watching Netanyahu, you don't even have to do anything. You just have to sit back. And
just let Netanyahu blow up the country.
Yeah. Mars is saying, hi, Ali Mookie, with Yasser Arafat's actions during the end of the Oslo Accords and the other efforts to resolve the issues with the Palestinian. How is talk possible? They seem to be just as stubborn. Yeah, they're both. I don't think people on the ground. This is what I was trying to say. I don't think people on the ground there at all are going to be able to really come to a conclusion. And the whole point of having peace talks is to be able to talk to people who've screwed you over, been unjust, who've committed injustice to you in the past. There have been people like brutal injustices. People have died and everything. You have to look at people like that, right? And people who've occupied you, people who've bombed you. You have to look at people like that, and you have to say, I need to talk to them. That is the definition of peace talks. If you're not going to do that, if all you're going to do is go back and just pretend like you have a time machine, you can go back and secure justice retrospectively, you're never going to be able to secure it prospectively. It's not going to happen. So it's, yes, they're stubborn. There were a lot of peace deals that were, a good deal.
And I heard Bill Clinton recently.
Doesn't matter. Who cares?
In his inimitable accent. We were so close, right?
Well,
I agree with you. It's like you can look back at those and find problems, but there's two sides to every story.
Yeah.
And at this point, it don't matter. It doesn't matter. Point where Israel's got no choice, and the Palestinians, frankly, do. Mm-hmm. Because they're just going to continuously be a thorn in their side. Try neutralizing the cat that's gotten out of the bag after.
Yeah, it's gonna be very, very difficult. Anyway, well, we're gonna wrap this up. This is our sort of first. This is a lot of this podcast. Many episodes in the future, they're going to be recorded, so they can come out normally. Unlicensed therapist with me. This is available everywhere. It's on YouTube. It's on Instagram. All the links are there. Just go to Unlicensed Therapist Podcast on Instagram. Unlicensed Therapist Podcast, one word. On YouTube, it's on Facebook. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, pretty much across the board, all streaming platforms, Instagram and everything. So I think I've said
and
that.
You're gonna copy this up into vignettes too, right?
Yes, we're gonna do the whole thing.
Little clippets, little vignettes. That'll be great.
Yeah,
because everyone's on TikTok. You got about 30 seconds max.
Yeah. We're gonna do that. We're gonna put this stuff out there a lot, and I'm really excited about having it go. What you have here, Spitz is one of my best friends, so it's something. Full disclosure, the Muslim and the Jew are we're actually aligned on a lot of things in this case. So, and we've had a lot of different conversations, and he's going to be a regular guest here. I think probably the closest thing to a co-host, if anything. And I want to talk. You're going to be back here talking about the book that you wrote.
This is my shameless pitch, folks, at the end of this transmission. Super Santa. I'm a Jew, and I wrote the story of a Christian superhero with another Muslim. So I think nobody is better qualified to retell the story of Santa Claus and St. Nicholas in a contemporary setting than Mookie Spitz and Rusty Unisaw. We're on Amazon. If you want a Secret Santa or a White Elephant present, go for it. That's my shameless pitch. And also, I am on Medium. So a lot of the opinions I've shared, I've already kind of journaled there. I'm Mookie Spitz at Medium. I would love a dynamic dialogue. I'm all ears. I'm Mookie Spitz on Facebook too. I might not friend you, but you can follow me and DM me any atrocities that you care to share. I love memes. So anyway, thank you, Ali, for having me. I really appreciate it. I look forward to a continued conversation. I look forward to seeing the little snippets
it'll be good. Super Santa is like, again, I just want to reiterate. I mean, this is another sort of like Abrahamic creative literary orgy here, like where Spitz loves doing this. Is that he's the Jewish guy and a Muslim guy wrote a book about a Christian icon, which is Santa Claus.
Yeah, who better? Who would be more
the best Christmas book? And this is not a kid's book. My kid does love it, but Spitz has warned me many times.
Rated R.
Not read it to the kids.
It's pretty ginormous. There's an ebook, and we're like looking at 470 pages, almost 200 illustrations, and it's the labor of love. And I'd be eager to hear what you think about it too. So
yeah. So I don't know why my screen just went dark. Maybe it's because I was doing this.
All right, they can see it.
Anyway.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So
thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Follow Unlicensed Therapists on Instagram, Facebook, take it everywhere it is, all Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, everywhere. It's everywhere. So you can start following this episode. It's going to be up. And we're going to see you soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And
right.
dear IDF, from an American Jew, calm the fuck down, right? You get the bad guys, but chill out a little bit and get rid of Netanyahu and just start it over again, because the stakes are high. And frankly, I don't want Trump back. All the indicators are Trump coming back, and that's a whole separate story right there. But
yeah.
Represent.
I'm going to say free Palestine from the occupation and from Hamas. And from Hamas. Please. Let's do that. Okay. Let's go.